Welcome to the dark side of the female psyche with Michael Tsarion. Here we will be delving deeply into those dark corners of psychology that few have the courage to acknowledge, the evil that exists within the female psyche. This series aims to offer you viable solutions, resources, and potent insights that can aid you in your rehabilitation and empowerment. But be forewarned, this is a series not for the faint of heart, nor is it for the easily triggered. Rather, it is only for those courageous women who realize the severity of the hour humanity is in. This means if you're going to listen to this series, you need to be ready to take self-ownership over your reactions and your responses. Because while women do hold the power to change the world, the state and quality of that change will invariably be influenced by how well a woman knows her own psyche, how beautiful, honorable, and dignified that woman chooses to become. If you are a woman who is choosing to willfully evolve, if you are a woman who sincerely desires to master yourself, your mind, and your behavior, then the information shared throughout this series will serve you well. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the dark side of the female psyche. Here with Michael Tsarion, and we're continuing our deep dive into this topic matter. We've been going into some very interesting crevices of history that many aren't speaking about. So it's quite a privilege to be able to learn about this from someone who's as studied as Michael on the topic. So Michael, if you'd like to start, we can take it from wherever you would like to begin.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you. And you're quite right. This is an extremely taboo subject. No one else is approaching it the way I do, even though you do have some red pill type movements out there. It's encouraging. I'll definitely say that. But it can easily veer off and end up in the ditch if those guys aren't careful with where they're at. So far, I see that none of them have really been reading women's studies work. They haven't even really been reading any psychologists' work. It's beneath the pop level, which is not encouraging. So, yeah, it could easily turn into a ship of fools, without a rudder, without a proper navigator. They don't want me. They don't want anything I'm doing. And again, they wouldn't be the only group that has circled the wagons against my work. That's been the way it is since the way in the beginning. But I don't want to bore people with that story. But so I've just carried on, to do my own thing, my own way, and leave it at that. And just sort of then observe it when other pups jump up, attempting to bite off parts of this. It's usually quite comical how they try to do it. And how they get traction or whatever, I mean, they know very, very little about world history, and even less about controversial aspects of history or the hidden byways of this whole thing. And again, they maybe don't also go and study the goddess tradition or ancient Judaism or ancient paganism, all of these other wide, like the things we've been covering. We can jump from pediatrics and the psychology of the child over to ancient Babylon and the history of, the origins of the biblical stories and ancient Ireland and things like that. And that's what you need to be able to do. You have to have this diachronic and synchronic approach. Otherwise, the real secrets of history will remain elusive. And what you'll be doing is repeating the same kind of approach that has been institutionalized in the academies. See, I'm free from them. I absolutely despise them. I don't want nothing to do with them, even their methodologies. It's a crock, right? The whole thing. It's all set up. I don't want paradigms to be broken, to be shifted or not shifted. Look, I'm worried all about paradigm. You guys haven't worked out that 5 minutes after you've got a paradigm, it will be shifted. It will collapse. You need to know by some of the greatest experts the world has ever produced that a paradigm will shift. Is that where you're at? I'm into the man who knew that the moment you've got a paradigm, it's bankrupt.
Exactly.
Right? You got to be a little faster on the draw than that. But it took them hundreds of years, the academics, these fuddy-duddies, these flunkies of the first order, to get it. They had to have one of the most eminent men, Thomas Kuhn, come from within to put their fucking faces in it, right? And then still they haven't known what to do. Okay, he shook up things enough so that some brilliant minds finally said, wow, what a breather. You've helped widen our horizons. But, that was a tiny smattering of great minds. I study those people. I have respect for them. Yeah, I list them in my work. But the vast majority just hunkered on down with their paradigms and double down, triple down on the paradigm. We're talking here about materialism. I'm not going to look to these people to tell me anything, about the world. They've got it all wrong. They've got the whole story of ancient philosophy wrong. They've got the whole thing, wrong. They're in love with the East. Primitive. They're in love with the Orient and a lot of the nonsense that come out of there. They're in love, or they get 40% of them. They claim they're even still Christians. I mean, what's so good about that? Right? What's so great about that? They think that that's something high and mighty. Then they fill the institutions with these feminists. What's so brilliant about that? They don't represent women. They're the greatest threat to womankind is the feminist. And when you shove a mic into their face and ask them, so why are you a feminist? The garbage that spews forth, because it's a hysterical thing, right? You put the mic in somebody else's face. I'm in a crowd of other people. I didn't know you were going to ask me. I just go along with all this other sheep. So they have nothing to say. And then the average person who backed it, who may say, well, look, I don't really sign on for it, but it must be based in something. There's some really prestigious names there. They got some, back in the 70s, it looked like this thing had some pretty big names, New York Times bestsellers and all this. So I'm in on it. I don't really know what the hell it's all about. And they couldn't even tell what we've talked about, you and I, that no, the exaltation of woman always, without fail, demands the denigration of the male. You couldn't even get that far? Have you guys got degrees or something? You've all come out of school and college? And this obvious fact you can't see? And by God, if the shoe was on the other foot and a man start talking about his world and openly denigrated the female world, it would be a scandal. That man would lose his job even if he was Walter Cronkite back in the 70s. Wouldn't stand up. Of course, we're not there because no man did stand up back in the 70s or the 80s. Men are as responsible as women. Let's get that clear. I've even focused on the men who, remember, were feminists and who played along with this agenda right to their dying day. And I hope that in these shows I've shown where they are wildly wrong. Wildly wrong. I mean, amazingly wrong. And yet the contradictions are looming and glaring. Some of these people were surgeons, brain surgeons. Do you realize that? Major figures, celebrated all over the world. Others were psychologists and sociologists of the top rank. But they're not aware that you can be anima possessed. They didn't read the footnotes of the great psychologists. So that before you go out and utter something in the world, you might want to know your own basic profile. This force that you're talking about, the goddess, the anima, the feminine spirit, is incredibly powerful psychologically as a type. It dominates. Jung said it did, and I believe him. It's all there. The proof is all there. And it has its own mysterious fascination. We even had slides about that. And it has this extra level of mysteriousness and fascination because, of course, you were in participation with it as a child before you were sexed, before you were a girl or a boy, right? Before any of that came online. You were this ego germ. You were this fetus in this incubated state. Absolutely 100% dependent. And passive to the female. You were feminine to the masculine. Do you know how easy it is to overthrow an apple cart called feminism? In the Kabbalah, when they analyze the tree of life, and many scholars have said, we've tried a lot of these patternings and it doesn't seem to work. And the gender one doesn't seem to work. We can't attribute the gender properly to any of the, 10 Sephirah. And I don't know who it was, Gershom Scholem or one of the other great scholars, Halevi. It could have been, somebody came along and went, well, it's because you're making a mistake. The upper Sephirah at the top, the one who's above, is always masculine, and the one beneath it is always feminine. But the feminine is masculine to the one below it. And the one that's feminine below it is masculine to the one below it. And that was the answer. Now just take that formula, which is wonderful, fantastic, and bring it to where we talked about the fetus. In the state of that unconscious, in the semiotic phase, which is out of time, so you can't say, oh, it was 1 year, it's 2 years, it's 9 months. No, this is an eternity in the womb and in the semiotic period that follows. The mother is masculine to the child. Just let that sink in. So all this palava, right, about the genders can be torn through. You can fire a cannonball through it in seconds. The mother is the masculine principle to her child for quite a long time. And once that's been thrown out, now we can talk. Right? As a type, not as a stereotype. See, this is why they want to fudge us, mess us around. But archetypally, as a type, the woman begins her motherhood, whether she's the terrible mother or she's the dragon mother. It doesn't make any difference. Just like the Sephirah. She is the masculine power to the child that is always feminine in relation to her, typologically. Then, as we've said, and we've tried to approach this in multiple ways, but you can say it again, all forms of life that are conscious, that will be conscious like the human being, and probably a lot that are non-conscious, know what they don't like. Have inbuilt senses given by nature to know what it is that they need to get away from, that feels uncomfortable, that are sources of unpleasure. This is a perfectly natural thing to happen to us. And you can be a couple of months old, after you're born. And you better believe this will be where it's at. They've even noticed it, the sucking on the breast. All of this involves this. And a child knows immediately if the mother isn't present emotionally. She's not giving, then it'll become more, aggressive. So again, aggression is always secondary. This man's violence that they just love to keep on, wide-eyed, moronic wallies out there. don't even know the etiology of aggression. The child will bite the nipple when the mother's distracted, when the mother is really could be desiring to be somewhere else, isn't into it, doesn't want it. Just like, a man can tell when a woman is having sex and she's not there, she doesn't want to know. Well, the child is even 10 times more sensitive. It knows when the mother isn't into it.
Mm.
And so there's only one thing it can do, bite. So the initiation of the aggressive instinct in each and all cases operates this way. But back to the point, the child wants to get away from the unpleasure. And this then awakens in it the masculine mode. Remember, I said it's always feminine, but then the masculine mode of aggression, it's not destructiveness yet, but it's the masculine mode, the Martian, right? Energetic mode. It's really the beginnings of differentiation is what it is. The idea of independence and separation begins because I want to get away from that. It's like, having a door wide open and the freezing air coming in. You want to get up and shut the door and be back in the warm again. But it is the mother that is the environment of the child. She is the atmosphere that it wants to get away from. And that can go on for 7 or more years as the mother clearly withholds love, clearly plays mental games with the child, and clearly shows in every way, I wish you weren't born. What do you think the reaction to that is going to be? I'd be amazed if it was passive. Now, we get the passive children. They're called the fawners. It's a coping mechanism, right? And you do get it. And they're going to struggle all the way through their lives. They're going to be your chronic alcoholics and chronic drug addicts, riddled with self-hate because they were forced into a position where they had to cow, their energies, and they didn't fight back. Their opposite is the delinquent who fought back. But he'll have his problems as well because he'll end up, breaking the law, being hated by everybody. And he'll go down into that area where he'll often, have to be ostracized or imprisoned or, disciplined all the time. Like you get these kids in school. But we're not talking about the superficial stereotypes. We're talking about what underlies these things archetypally, what underlies these people in their nature. So this is the difference then between achievers and non-achievers, the difference between the superior types and the inferior types, when you really know what you're talking about beyond the pop level of it. Because the criminal type is also a superior type. See, this is confuse the normie. What are you talking about? Because you don't know anything. You don't. America, the West, doesn't know the first thing about any of this psychology. He's superior because he thinks he's one up on everybody else because he gets what he wants. And if you tell him he can't get what he wants, he breaks in and gets it anyway. So as far as he's concerned, that high makes him superior. Hey, they're all wondering who did it. Look at them all. Look at them all. I sit back with all the treasures around me. Aren't I a great guy? You know it. They wear the bling. They go around in the cabriolet cars, right? They think they're the life of the party. They're womanizers, right? All these idiots. They are superior types, but not in a positive way. Then you get your superior type who is more positive. But you get your inferior types, and that doesn't mean a bad thing. It just means that in their coping mechanism, they decide, we know all about superiority, but it's always at the hands of somebody else, namely the parents. So I'm an inferior type, but I know everything there is to know about superiority. Yeah, when it's being wielded by somebody else over me. I'm just going to accept it. I'm just going to sit back and accept that. Because I'm constitutionally weak or something's happened, something's snapped. Or, again, this usually happens when there's more than one sibling around. And the fawners discover that the sibling who does the fawning gets the approval. So I'm going to do that too. You see, like that. Maybe not a sibling, but a cousin or, something. They see, why is he always getting pats on the head, he or she? I'm going to do as they do. Look at all the toys they get. Look at all the approval. They get new clothes. They get the food they want. Child is a mimicker. They'll learn very quickly. But back to the point. When you know what it is you don't want, you move away from it. So this creates the momentum that is called the masculine energy in this secondary, context. So the child has to, like we said 2 programs ago, struggle with that which holds it back. Now, the dragon mother doesn't hold you back. She's totally aware of what's going on and doesn't impede you going through the phallic stage or even the previous stages, nor does she hurry you through any of the stages like the phallic in order to over-sexualize you, like she might do to a girl or sometimes to a boy too. But mostly to a pretty girl, she'll hurry you through that stage. That's a fiasco as well. That's a breach. That's a crime for which they're never paid back. This time the mother's promising the girl all sorts of worldly things. Oh, you mean the 5 broken marriages, the 5 divorces that John had to go through? Because I had no idea what a good man was, and I went with all these louses. Thanks, Mom. You filled my head full of nonsense. And I just thought that sexuality and beauty would cut it. And it can, as I said, it occasionally can be done to a boy. And also the other thing is the prevention. We've focused mostly on that. The prevention, the degrading, right? The passing, you pass through you always have to pass through the phallic. So let's get that straight. Everybody does pass through the phallic. But how do they pass through it? Through the back door? When they haven't integrated that stage? Because the mother has so defamed and humiliated her child, her boy child? No woman will ever look at you. Look how scrawny you are. Over and over again at bathing time or whenever. Nannies used to do this, in the Victorian time. If a kid was too short, or some other way, maladapted, the amount of horror, or another sibling that was approved of, you see. Oh, the girls will go for you. You're so handsome. You're mommy's little prince. Oh, you're going to be a woman killer. Have you ever seen these pompous little kids? These little Lord Fauntleroys running around? This is how it all happens.
Well, it's got me wondering actually just about in the modern day how to get to be kind of like the golden child, so to speak. I mean, if that's the right phrase, it's almost more like if you're being too masculine, that seems to be what many parents are calling out. You're too rough, you're too rude to the boys.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the other approach that has happened now because of the rise of feminism. It wasn't there as much before.
Mm.
Is the wholesale derision of the masculine. And then with that comes the flip side. When I said earlier that, that wagons have been circled against me and my work. Now we'll touch on that. Is because the flip side of what you just said is the blanketing projection on womankind by both male and female. You see it in the comments. They think I'm full of rage or something. This is their pathetic, asinine way of reacting against me, because when you challenge that blanket projection, it's like a field of snow. You can't crack it. You can't because if I crack that, then the latent matrophobia in all of these women, right, will seep through and they'll have to confront it. Their anger is looming below. So they don't want me or anyone else breaking through that facade, shaking it up, so that all that pus, this is the real shadow work, can come out. This is the real thing, the real shadow work. Or the injustices, not only that they've suffered, but they may have already committed to their own children. So when I talk, they're all for war. It's so pathetic. It's actually, it makes me laugh. I'm no more angry about this subject than a virologist looking into a petri dish at some bacteria. But isn't it interesting that they think I am? How pathetic, how narrow-minded. They're the biggest culprits, standing in a world full of this injustice, right? Where the weak are being crushed underfoot, and there's nothing to them, and they want to tear out the eyes of somebody who is addressing it, instead of getting behind you and sharing your videos, and this is wonderful, this helps me so much, and then I know it'll help other people. No, none of that. So I'm in no illusion about what I talk about, and I've seen the reactions of other hosts, mostly male. Their IQ is reduced to the level of a turkey. when you bring up these subjects. It's a giggle. It's horrendous to see. It's so far out of their reality. They're walking through the world. They're getting married. They're dating girls. Do you realize? There's no compass whatsoever, and they don't want it. They don't want it. But this idea shows you again that the child is naturally, organically programmed to move away from discomfort, from unpleasure. And it will do that violently. So who comes along, you tell me, isolates that fact and tries to demonize men for something that's perfectly natural and is actually born out of the mother as a reaction to her clinging, anti-natural behavior? They never taught you this. In fact, they've weaponized it. They use it against you. Now, this is not to exonerate, the aberrant forms of violence that come later. We're talking about its origin. We're talking about where the thing begins. We've already admitted that the delinquent fight type will continue to misuse it because it worked for him. It worked in these absolutely early semiotic stages. He's not going to give it up. He never can give it up. That's why the jails are full. And criminologists know that, you just can't sort out some of these people. They're addicted to crime. But I'm telling you why. It's a success story for them. They were up against a collective will. A will which said you're not going to have what you want. And they said, but I know how to push back at that. In this transition from the inferior position to the superior position. And the payoff that comes with that, the high that comes with that, is highly addictive. It is even in the non-criminal type. We all have it. We all want that payoff, and when we get it, we become disciples of the will. Right? And we ride it bareback. We don't care then that total institution might occur later on. When you keep on putting sugar or salt into a solution, there's going to come a point where the whole thing crystallizes. It's called, critical mass, total institution. One day, as Freud and others suspected, the will be will galvanize with all the collective will that's already there in the world before we come in, and there'll be this total institution. I already see it happening. The crystallization is already taking place. The collective will being now so strong from all the admixture of the individual wills, down through time, that the ordinary individual born now knows instinctively that you cannot push up against it, leading to a kind of apathy that I'm already seeing in the male world. What do you think the soy boy is? What do you think the hipster and the millennial is, partly? Or these docile males sitting in their mother's basement as they keep on reminding you that this is happening. This is completely understandable sociologically. Because the collective will is now so strong, the facticity of life is so strong, that one is right to know, my little teensy weensy will cannot push up against this anymore. In fact, I may have even tried it, and it doesn't work. So what some have called the iron cage of bureaucracy. Well, I'm talking about more than just bureaucracy. This is total institution. Right? That solution of water that crystallizes because you just keep putting the sugar, keep putting it, let it dissolve, keep putting more and more and more, and then finally, you've seen this in your experiments at school, how they show you this happens. And it finally crystallizes. We are approaching this moment of apocalypse where an individual will cannot find its way. Generation Z is already there. They're already breaking down. They're already apathetic. And their only way to make a dent is to strike back like this murder of Charlie Kirk. Just shoot it or hack it. Kill it. Right? It's becoming epidemic. You can't push against it anymore. It's really, really serious. And there's absolutely nothing that can be done about it because each child is organically programmed to use its will in exactly the way I've described. You can't park it. Why would you want to park it? The only way that you could possibly even think of this being changed is if there were no terrible mothers in the world. Right? The will would still being used. Of course it would, but it wouldn't be used as violently as it is now. Because the violence only comes when the mother is holding the child back from its independence. You know, like I said, arresting it on these multiple different stages of the psychosexual journey. And of course, if a mother didn't do that, well, yeah, the reading for the violent use of the will would be far lower than it is today. There's your solution, if you can call it that. But we're not going to be there. The terrible mother has multiplied in their millions since the rise of feminism. The problem has become worse, and they are responsible. Man is not the source of violence. Woman is the source of violence. There's no talking out of it. It's just they burn the court. They burn the filing cabinet so that you don't have the evidence. You try to come in with the evidence. Here's Sherlock. And you find out the bloody courtroom is in ruins. They've come in the night and dynamited it. Sorry, there's no court today. Can't bring the facts together. We had all the evidence, truckloads of it. We were about to tell the world, but guess what? There was a bomb threat. Couldn't make it to the arena. Well, witnesses have been bribed. It's absolutely unbelievable. You know, this is a crisis. And all they can say is, Michael, you're angry?
Yeah, it's a pretty piss poor response, to be honest with you. Like,
That's right.
I mean, just to be completely honest, it really is. Because even if someone doesn't agree with parts of what you say, such a response shows they weren't even listening full stop. Like, there's no thoughtfulness to that. It's pure emotion. And I'm not denigrating emotion, but if it's emotion without a masculine principle channeling it, a healthy masculine principle, it's just vitriol, venom.
Yeah. Sure it is. Sure it is. And I've had it for, you know, because another thing is they think I stumbled across this in recent times after I did my other work, the better stuff. No. I've said it clearly. I've been studying this since 1989. This is the earlier work. Dumbass. You see, the cloth ears, they don't even listen to what you had to say. It didn't play a role in my early career because I chose not to, because it wasn't as worked out. This is vast. Absolutely vast. I am compressing one of the largest and most, chaotic in a way. The pieces that you need, you see, have to come from so many places. It can be done. It can be brought together. Others are, I've taken my lead from some great people, and one day maybe we'll do a podcast on a couple of those names. But it's also not just repeating what they've said, it's using my own gray cells, you see, to process it for a modern age so that it can be understood today by anyone, given the medium that we're talking on. There's no reason why I should complicate it when we've got this incredible democratic medium to put it on. That would be ludicrous. Why handicap yourself? You've got this very, open source here. Then the best thing you can do is articulate it in a clear manner for today's audience so that anyone, even the TikTok generation, can get it. And that's what I've done. But hey, if you want to turn to the slides,
Sure.
we can open another chapter of this and look at something I think is very, very important. But first, we'll remind, we've got 2 or 3 slides just as sort of a reminder of where we are in the story of the greater historical process that we're talking about when it comes to matriarchy and goddess traditions.
All right, I'll start with this
please.
slide here.
Thank you.
It is difficult to grasp the immensity and significance of the extreme reverence paid to the goddess over a period of at least 7,000 years and over miles of land cutting across national boundaries and vast expanses of sea.
Yet it is vital to do just that to fully comprehend the longevity as well as the widespread power and influence this religion once held. Merlin Stone, When God Was a Woman.
So she's summing it up, that this thing lasted up until about 7,000 years ago, was prominent since way back, since almost 150,000 years ago, up till, she thinks 7,000. Okay, fine. That's the 8th millennium. This thing was rolling full speed ahead and was very widespread. So then that obviously, if that is the case, then something must have happened, you see, to stop it and change it. And this is then where all the different theories come in. I've got my theories, everybody else has their theories. And that's what I did. I started looking at the theories of what might have changed this and it changed all over the world. Every culture, from Phoenicia, Canaan, Israel, right? Babylonia, the Assyrians, the Scythians, there's not the Greco-Romans even, their ancestors, the Celts, the Norse, even over in India. The presence of this ubiquitous goddess, Parvati, Ishwara, you name it. And then the decline. But let's go on. Let's read the second one. It had to be explained, you see.
We will never understand the psychology of either women or men as long as we fail to acknowledge that a state of war has existed between the sexes for approximately 6,000 years. 6,000 years ago, patriarchy triumphed over women, and society became organized on the basis of male domination. Women became the property of men and were obliged to be grateful to them for every concession. Rainer Funk, editor preface for Love, Sexuality, and Matriarchy by Erich Fromm.
So again, similar dates and a similar point. There was a severance. And you could take it from the dates that they're giving when you really push it back far. Or you could just settle for about 1,000 years BC when the Old Testament was, composed, or at least some of the events, the patriarchs of Israel came on the scene, basically from when monotheism, as we know it, solidified out of the previous polytheistic modes, and traditions that existed. You could do that. It was too vague to go back even further. Then 1,000 years BC. Something is going on. These two authors are pushing it further back than that. And of course, they have to be right, because even 1,000 years BC, you read about the Hebrew patriarchs and the prophets, Amos, Hosea, the King Josiah, and others, Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, suppressing the goddess traditions. It's in the Old Testament. And that's after the rise of Judaism. That's after 1,000 years BC. So this thing was still going strong even then. So you must bear that in mind as well. These goddess traditions that were so repulsive that it caused the split that they're talking about, and it caused the rise of the paternalistic modes and the traditions. When they push it back earlier, right, to these earlier dates, like 7th millennium, they're thinking of these Aryan, sun-worshipping, horseback-riding invaders coming in and slashing and murdering, and cutting down all of these so-called matriarchal cultures. Now, we've already shown that that's a pretty weak, right? That was all the rage one time, but I've sent you videos, and you can see that hasn't actually really been established. And it certainly wasn't why. It might have happened in a couple of instances. And even if it did happen in a couple of instances, I'm still interested in why that was. You still have to explain it. And if you read closely into these women's studies books, they don't explain it. You're looking for something that isn't there. There's a lot of window dressing. They talk about the rise of the Kurgans on the steppes of Russia. They talk about sun worshippers. They talk about male horseback riding invaders. But the one thing that they never, ever, ever, ever even address is why. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe it is something about me. But I feel that that's a huge chunk left out. I would be expecting to have a reason. These things don't happen without reasons. And you guys are the scholars. You're the ones with the degrees. You're the ones who got your books published. Yet nowhere can I find in all your pages a reason for why this all happened, this bloodlust. Just one day, man decided to turn on women in the way that you describe, but never do I find out a reason. I'm immediately on the scent. I'm immediately suspicious of the whole thesis. But let's go on, please.
The Levite laws of the Israelites, from the time of Moses onward, demanded virginity until marriage for all women upon threat of death by stoning or burning, and once married, total fidelity only upon the part of the wife, also upon threat of death. Merlin Stone in her work, When God Was a Woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the man could have 100 wives, 100 concubines, but all of a sudden, one of the things that came in with this paternalistic approach and the monotheism is it a complete obedience of the woman. Her virginity is needed before marriage, and certainly after marriage, she has to be absolutely loyal. And it seems like little, but you again have to ask why. What's she done to cause this? And the only answer that the feminists can give is, well, men are brutes. And this pathetic explanation has accepted the whole world over with almost no dissent. Try to let that sink in. Because anybody can say anything. Right? We have enough of it on the internet. The internet has shown us that anyone can say anything. You can believe the earth is flat. By the way, just in case you didn't catch that one, you can say anything. But why would it be believed universally? The sociologist is still trying to work this out. Well, here's another one, a big one. But let's go on.
In the religion of Ashtoreth, just as in the worship of the goddess elsewhere in the Near and Middle East, women continued to follow the sacred sexual customs. The Bible relates that Kedishtu in Jerusalem wove veils or cloths for the Asherim, images of the goddess Asherah, in what Roland DeVoe referred to as the, quote, house of the sacred prostitutes. He too asserted that the sexual customs were quite typical of Canaanite temples, and that the women of Israel followed this practice despite the condemnation of Hebrew leaders. Merlin Stone, When God Was a Woman.
See? So I'm right. It continued even into the period. That's why it had to be dealt with. So it didn't stop 6,000 years BC or something. It was carrying on well past the rise of Judaism. This orgiastic goddess tradition. And so the rise of monogamy, the rise of monotheism inevitably followed, where now there could be no consort of the god. It was only singular. Oh, and even the god there couldn't be any bisexuality anymore. There was no androgynous god. He had to be strictly masculine. You see all these abnormal things. Now, at the time, the patriarchs had no idea that they were leaving a major footprint, a major trail that you could follow by all of this. They just did it in the raw. They weren't concerned about what tomorrow's world was going to think. And that tomorrow's world would notice this crime. That obviously this doesn't fit. And you've got the whole of ancient Egypt and ancient Babylon and all these other cultures showing you, the triplicity. God, goddess, and child. Everywhere in India, and we're not going to fall for this masculinization of the god. You see, they didn't care about that. They just went right ahead because it served them at the time. It was realpolitik. You had to suppress this feminine power because it had got out of control. And that was the sole duty. Just realpolitik, just handle it. That's how ancient people did things. Weren't worried about consequences or the judgment of history. So this monotheism arose. It's not to say they didn't have little aspects of it here and there in the past, like with Akhenaten and what have you, there's a different story. But the Jews who came out of Egypt anyway when you really know the true story, they are Egyptian. They latched onto this and they said, okay, this is good for us. And they stripped it all away. Baal was gone. Sun lovers were gone. The feminine principle was gone. And God was just purely male. No more bisexuality there. And then, of course, all the rites and rituals that were associated with the goddess, all across the Asia Minor and all over the world into Europe, all the many, the bacchanalias, the rites and rituals, of which there were very common, at least 2 a month. These Phrygian rites, these Eleusinian rites, these Orphic and Bacchic rites. They're fascinating to study, the cult of Venus. All of this was slowly suspended, slowly suppressed. Sometimes violently, or sometimes it came back. Like under King Solomon, he was very lenient. He let the whole thing flood back. And there were other times in Judaism where it flooded back. And multiple times actually. There's multiple times in the whole history of Judaism where it all came back. And idols were allowed to be built again, and put inside the Temple of Solomon. They'd line these idols up and they'd allow this idol worship. In the case of Solomon, of course, quite famous, that he let all his concubines in. And much later on, Alexander the Great, he insisted that his officers should always marry into the women of the conquered lands. And so half-caste children were born. And of course, he was lenient again, even with all the conquered people could worship, as long as they gave oblation, the obligatory political oblation, religio-political oblation to the Greek deities, you were allowed to do whatever you wanted in your own culture. And the Romans, exactly the same. They were very, very egalitarian in that way. As long as you nod to our gods when you're told to do that, on a public level, then you can worship whatever you want. And the whole of history changed because one group refused to do that. That's the Jews. Out of the whole Roman Empire, only the Jews said, no, we don't like that deal. We're not just going to worship our gods under your edict. We don't want to worship your gods or worship in your temples. But the Romans were saying, but why? We're allowing you complete sovereignty and complete freedom. And all we're telling you to do is, once a month, do a little oblation to our gods, just to acknowledge the colonization. And the Jews are the only people who wouldn't do it. And fought back, with ferocity, the tiny, tiny group, the might of the Roman Empire. And I don't know who it was. I can't remember, Trajan or one of the, I think all of them, Hadrian, Trajan, Vespasian, Titus, you name it. Any of these emperors had to send triple the amount of troops that you would normally use to suppress anyone else in the empire. Double and triple, 80,000 troops to suppress a handful of these Jewish warriors. And time again, the Romans had to send people in to make mass slaughter, It was horrendous what had happened. The Jews already had their own tyrants amongst their own people, kings of Judah, that were immensely violent. That's been sort of scrubbed from history. But I'm just talking here about the Romans and the Greeks. And had the Jews just said, yeah, we'll take that contract, the whole of our history, they say there had been no Jewish revolts. If the Jews had not done that, there had probably been no Christianity, no need for it. And God knows what else there wouldn't have been, because there would have been no need. You see, all the whole of history wouldn't have taken place. So just an interesting footnote there. Because they fought back, the entire status quo of the Middle East changed. And out of that turmoil, came events that we now know, of course, helped by discoveries from the Dead Sea Scrolls and other things that have come to light. But even when you didn't have that, the general history as we know it has always been taught to us came about. And you can clearly see you would not have had Constantine. There would have never been any need for a new religion of the Roman Empire, which became Christianity. More likely, the aristocratic families of both Greece and Rome would have been much more influenced by Judaism. It was happening, actually. It's not to say that there wasn't anti-Semitism in Greece and Rome. There was. But the vast majority of Greeks and Romans were very, very tolerant and favorable and fascinated with Judaism, fascinated with its moral code particularly. And the same groups hated the Christians. Hated them. Yeah, didn't want them. That's why you have that whole thing about the lions and the arenas and all of that.
Right.
Yeah, that's how that came about. It wasn't Jews that were put in any arenas to be eaten by lions. Oh, and by the way, in the 4th century, at the time of Constantine, when Christianity was just getting formed, more Christians, this is Constantine, killed other Christians than the Romans had ever done in the 300 years prior. So in 1 century, Christians killed more Christians. Constantine killed more Christians than the Roman empires did, with dozens, half a dozen emperors in the 300 years before. This is Paul's legacy. This is the 5th sect. They're more criminal, more violent than anything that ever existed. Even the lunatic zealots. All really they wanted was their Messiah on the throne and Rome out of their hair, so that they could be doing whatever madness they did in the boiling hot wilderness. Just leave them alone. Who cares what they want? They're the 4th sect. By the time the 5th sect is even being born, Sarah, right? It's up to its eyeballs in blood. But this is what the average Christian today is trying to defend. But the pagans, the pagans were the ones you want to get. The pagans were the evil ones.
Just very timely. Had a conversation about that just today. But I do have a question. People may be asking about the 5th and the 4th sect. I'm just wondering if there's somewhere where we can point people in the links after I upload the video.
Oh, well, I think in episode 1 of my Dead Sea Scrolls Deception,
Okay.
we covered it, and maybe episode 2, things like that. These
Thank
are
you.
terms used by Josephus. They're very loose. Basically, the Roman-hating extremists within Judaism were the 4th sect. And therefore, they included the Zealots, number 1, a group called the Psyche, and the group called the Essenes. Right? And maybe others that faded from history. You've heard of the great suicide at Masada. The Jews are always talking about that, right? The great hill of Masada where they all committed suicide because they were surrounded by Romans.
Oh.
That was their last holdout. Okay. And then they committed mass suicide. I go into all of this in that series.
Okay.
And then the 5th sect is St. Paul, who was a weird, wily character. So if you ever have Ralph Ellis on, he will go into detail about that, because he is the man who discovered something remarkable about Paul, and that he is identical, can you believe this, with the historian Josephus.
Oh, I did hear that much. I did hear that from
very,
Ralph.
very important.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this is alternative Judaism. This is not as it's written down for normies. Ralph is fucking, he's dynamited all that, right? So, but yeah, the 5th sect would be what Paul created. And it was a kind of Christianity, a kind of a simple Judaism that was catering for Gentile pagan races, like the Romans and others. The 4th sect were against it. They were against all the Gentiles. They were against all Rome and Greece. They hated the Hellenization. They hated the Jews who were for the Hellenization. Don't forget that in Judaism, it was all split up as well. That's why we call them sects. See, the Sadducee the Temple of Jerusalem was run by the Sadducees, and they liked the Greeks. They were Hellenized. They were filthy rich, and they were deeply in with the Egyptians, deeply in with the Parthians, and deeply in with the Romans and the Greeks. So other Jews hated them. In fact, the Zealots became Zealots because they were first murdering their own Jewish Sadducees. The Sicarii, right, which means knife. These were like the Antifa of the time. So they were first initiated, they began by being assassins a very, very skilled band of assassins who went around murdering Jews. All the Jews who were rich, who supported, the Greeks and the Parthians and the Romans. That's how you get your fourth sect. So they're born in blood. Yeah, fourth sect. They include Essenes. The Essenes were not as passive as people believe, just living out there in loincloths in the wilderness. No. They were zealots. And this is proven as well because you see there's 2 zealots of the 12 of Jesus. Jesus' 12 included Simon Zelotes and Judas, who was a Sychari zealot. They're doing this symbolically to tell you that even in zealots and Sychari were in amongst. This is how they play into history. So people would never have heard of them before by reading Josephus. Then they've at least heard about those groups by reading the story of the Gospels, because they were included, in that story. Badly, but at least they're included. That Jesus ministered unto them as well. What they tried to cover up in those stories was that Jesus wasn't a Essene. He came from a long line of masters that were, Essene masters. That's the stuff they wanted to cover up. And so a whole school of Catholic priests descended on the area after the Dead Sea Scrolls was discovered to breed lies, to muddy the waters about the nature of the Essenes and their origins. And I tell that whole story in 10 episodes of this Dead Sea Scrolls deception. So if anybody's interested, because we go into the whole history of Judaism and Christianity in there. And then after that, we've got a 4-part program on St. Paul. Now, these are top-notch shows. So if somebody wants to sign up even for a month on Unslaved and watch them, believe me, you'll get a lesson, history lesson there. It's absolutely fascinating.
And we'll make sure that's linked so people can find it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But yeah, let's read the next one.
No man whose testicles have been crushed or whose organ has been severed shall become a member of the assembly of the Lord. Deuteronomy 23:1.
Right. So central to the new temple after they came out of Babylon, after the exile, was the discovery of the book of Deuteronomy. It's like the second Moses. Another book written by Moses. The priests used it. It's a long story. But central to that is this, quote, if your testicles are not crushed or your penis hasn't been severed, which obviously means that was what was going on in these goddess cults. All right, stop. They're having to tell you this because it meant that in the rule of the goddess, this wonderful thing, right? A man had to be a castrati. Can you think of anything more evil, satanic, and fucking foul? And we know them as the Galli. They're the castrati. You can look it up. And this cult lasted way longer. The Jews were into it themselves. The Canaanites were into it. And it didn't die off. It just got suppressed. When the Jewish patriarchs suppressed all of this, it did not eradicate it. It just pushed it underground. And if you know symbolism, then when you're looking into the symbolism of the secret societies of the world, like Masonry, for one, you'll see these symbols of castration. When you see the picture of St. George and the Dragon, and the woman standing there passively by, as if nothing's happening, and you suddenly see if you know how to decode, the ancient artists have always told you about this. The monks who used to shave their hair into a tonsure. I go into this on many, many volumes of work to show you. Because it's not just the castration rite, it's many, many other rites, you see, that were imported, and there was cross-pollination. But the very fact that this kind of rite and ritual was common at the time, as it's revealed here in the book of Deuteronomy, tells you a great deal. Now, again, we have added this one because, of course, it's back. None of this is ancient history. It is back. What do you think a soy boy is today? What do you think these hipsters are today? History is not something old. We are ruled by history. We're run by it. It dominates our lives, a certain kind of history. So all these morons out there who are talking about the conspiracy, do you know the amount of chatter? The mind-numbing, mind-freezing chatter that's out there just on that one subject alone? And yet the real kernel of it, none of them know anything about this. The conspiracy is that the modern media know everything that I'm talking about and have in their magazines and their ad copy and pop videos, of course, as well, have triggered and stimulated and kindled, it's called kindled, atavistic memory, specifically within women. So as women have gained more, because of feminism, as women have gained more power in the world, in the commercial world, they've also been fed this poison by the high table, by the conspirators at the top. If you don't have this kernel, then all the other chatter of all your David fucking Ikes and Jim Marses and whoever you've got is worthless. And the list is long. On and on it goes. Sick of it. This is the biggest elephant in the room, and nobody addresses it. Partly, we've even talked about the reasons why. But this stimulation of atavistic memory in the race memory of women is extremely powerful. And it works. It works. And this, therefore, if you don't know that this is loose in the world, then all your fixes and all your potential solutions, they used to tell me, Michael, so where's your solutions? Where are your fucking solutions? See, there are no solutions if you don't have this in place. It's all just superficial. But we still haven't addressed in our show today what caused the breach. What caused the rising of the patriarchy? What caused the reign of the phallus, as it's called? The phallocratic move from the matrifocal. So let's go on to the next few slides and we'll nail it once and for all. A very, very important chapter in this whole saga.
Everything changed when the individual male understood that procreation necessarily depended upon his participation in the sexual act. That realization must have taken place during the times of settlement, the Neolithic period, that is, from the 8th to the 4th millennia BC, depending on the region. It is plausible, though not certain, that the first humans were unaware of the exact role of the male in procreation, not having established a causal relationship between coitus and parturition. Thus, their attitude toward the female, apparently weaker than the male, but mysteriously able to produce life, was ambiguous. A profound respect, if not veneration, and at the same time a kind of terror in the face of incomprehensible, even magic or divine powers. Jean Markel, the Great Goddess.
Exactly. So he's writing, this is a prominent Celtic scholar who's telling you clearly, as many scholars of the time knew, that for thousands and thousands of years, men were not aware of their role in childbirth. But they are relating it in a tame, friendly way. What is really going on is that men did not understand their role in childbirth, in coitus. They knew about coitus, but they didn't know that it gave rise to children because women kept the secret from them for thousands of years. But let's read on.
According to these authors, as well as many authorities who have written on this subject, in the most ancient human societies, people probably did not yet possess the conscious understanding of the relationship of sex to reproduction. Thus, the concepts of paternity and fatherhood would not have yet been understood. Though probably accompanied by various mythical explanations, babies were simply born from women. If this was the case, then the mother would have been seen as the singular parent of her family, the lone producer of the next generation, For this reason, it would be natural for children to take the name of their mother's tribe or clan. And this is from Merlin's Stone, When God Was a Woman.
See, for thousands of years, it's exactly it. Now, the Jews, for instance, are the same. Their children born were always named and thought of as descendants from the matriarchal line, the matrilineal descent, which is an old remnant, you see, of what we're talking about. So even the Jews had this. You mattered because you came down through the female line. How did that happen to be the case? Because it's a remnant of this old goddess tradition. But what is this tradition? Well, we've just said it already, that many scholars, the slide already is telling you that, knew this, that for thousands of years, and I'm saying it my way, that women hid from men the secret. The way they present it and the way they utter it is far too soft and too diplomatic. You can't keep this. This is a secret that, you know, it doesn't come naturally because, of course, it's 9 months. Every animal on the planet gives birth within days, or at the most weeks, and mostly it's days after, you know, you see them copulating. Nothing on this planet waits 9 months. That's almost a whole year. And in their time, in the ancient way, you know how they measured time? Oh, no. So this wasn't twigged, not even in the East, you know, Asia Minor or in Europe. It took time, in other words, for this to actually be fully understood. Now, I dug into this for the best part of 30 years, and I go into this in several podcasts on Enslaved and another work, right? But it needed to be brought out here because the ultimate result of this was it was a deception. And I get into the details, you know, of this deception in several works, which we can visit here, all the details of it. But the thing is that this is the part that's missing when I said that none of the feminist writers want to give you a reason as to why males rose up against women in these ancient times. But this is it. Because a point came, we don't know when, probably close to this 1,000, 2,000 mark, you know, when Judaism arose and monotheism arose. That's a pretty handy date. It could have been before. And again, we're talking about different regions. So it easily could have been before. One place can discover it, and another place discovers it later, right? It's a slow process rolling out over the different countries. But one by one, bit by bit, women's deception was revealed. To the horror, to the absolute horror of men.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what we call the rise of patriarchy is actually an act of revenge. And world feminism tried to conceal this from us, is based on its own deception because they all know this. So the deception of an ancient time has been replaced in the 20th century by top scholars. So now you know when I make snipes at the academics and when I have contempt for these women in power and the men, they're no different to me. Now you understand a bit of why. A bit of why. Because this is not a deception of ancient times anymore. This is repeated again. When modern feminism had the duty, the sovereign duty to humanity, to explain this so that there wouldn't be any conflict today between the sexes. A sin would have been created, women would have owned up, and everybody would have gone, and men would have gone, hey, we're guilty of a lot of things too. Let's shake hands. Let's move on. We're helping one another to become truly civil. It's called contrition. Right? Even the Bible admits, confess your sins and move on. Nothing of the kind has been done. The Satan is loose in the world. This is the real Satan. So the original crime, yes, that's horrendous that this was done. And I get into the details in other programs about how this was done. It's very, very fascinating. Now, there's a program on my premium dedicated to Otto Rank, Forgotten Genius, Otto Rank, and in that, I get into this. story, but there's other ones as well. More podcasts. I can send you, a couple of links, even a free stuff. In fact, if people go to my dragonmother.org site and go to extra, you'll see the list of interviews that deal with this. Dragonmother.org extra, you'll see a list of all the interviews, including some of the ones we've done, you and I are listed there. That's a good resource page for that. But therefore, the rise of patriarchy, which they climbed over themselves, to hide from us, just left it out. This is the reason. Because when tribes discovered this, and it was started to get abroad, massive changes happened between the sexes, and man discovered we can't let these women out of our sight anymore. And therefore, the so-called enslavement of women, the fact that they now had to live in walled cities. Right, because now you can watch them. In the hunter-gatherer situation, you don't know what they're up to. So, and also they wanted to separate the women from the older women. This crime that I'm talking about was perpetuated mostly by older hag women, the crones, that then came down in history as the witches. So what we know as witches all derives from this is the origin of the witch. The one who contaminated the younger women who were pregnant and told them to play it this way, to deceive the fucking living shit. But that doesn't concern us here. What concerns us here is the goddess tradition. And see, the consequence of this lie was the obvious deification of the woman. That slide also hinted at that. That now the woman was on the same level as the gods, because she alone produced children, magically. Whenever she wanted, she birthed a child. And if pressed, the crone told the younger women to say that they were walking one day and a flash of light came down and impregnated her. Or she sat on the sacred stone, that the clan knew about. Or a dove alighted somewhere. Or a strange animal, like a deer, a stag appeared. And on and on and on it went. And this is what we know in the Bible as immaculate conception, right? It even came into the Bible with Mother Mary.
Right.
Receiving, you don't know if it's an angel, if it's a beam of light, is portrayed as a dove. Oh, this is so old. This is just one instance of this divine intervention. A strange spirit came to me. And that's why men were told. And even during when there was marriage, can you believe this? Marriage existed and this was still unknown. The sex act wasn't connected with birth. It's monumental. The world turns on this lie. And when it was discovered, as I said, there was a reprisal. That's the true rise of the phallocratic principle, the paternalism, and the rise of what we call patriarchy. It's a laugh. It's a total farce. In 1,000 years, when they look back, they'll go, was this Monty Python? Were you guys that stupid? You fell for this matriarchy nonsense? Or you didn't see how you were being programmed? See, now the anthropologists, as these few slides are showing you, no, a lot of them knew about this. The great Otto Rank knew about it. Carol Ox, Merlin Stone, Shetland Redgrove, Monica Shue, John Markel. These are eminent people. They all knew this. Leonard Schlein. But there was a massive cover-up, or at least like the soft soap approach. Got to cut through all of it. But the deification of this goddess put her on, the deification of woman put her on the level of goddess. She loved it. The female vanity, the female ego at the time was into this, and not one of them dissented. Can you believe that? No woman broke the consensus. No woman uttered to man what was going on, ever. In the history of the world, no one broke the consensus. It lasted for thousands of years, this lie. Now, you don't have to know about Carl Jung or anything to do with race memory when I tell you that this is still there. in the deep corners of the psyche of the female. It's called atavism, an atavistic memory of supreme power, mixed in with the already feeling of superiority over an individual child on the stereotypical level. You get two forms of power mixing. One is of a normal mother in her feeling of supremacy over a little weak child that she bears from her body, all of that power. And now you've got a power that everyone didn't want to ever talk about, that I'm letting you know existed. The supremacy of the fakery of this. When you bring those two, one is bad, two together is atrocity. It's an abomination. And then pathetic attempts in more latter days to turn around and claim that man is the author of all physical violence. The audacity, in order to try to cover up everything we've just talked about. Feminism arose, breeding, broadcasting this other lie that when you look around the world and see nothing but violence, there's only one sex responsible, one sex only. After this being the true history, you don't know that this is a conspiracy of conspiracies? You're looking for the Illuminati? You can't read any ad copy? Men's daughters are allowed to watch this crap and look at these magazines. They have no idea what it's stimulating. Just looks like an ad for alcohol or something or other. Or Nickelodeon or the Kids Network or whatever it is. Cartoon Network and all the rest of it, all the video games, and it's unbelievable what's being mobilized. We are puppets on strings. And so this crime was never punished. Only blindly. Women have never taken responsibility for it. But let's go on and read those last few. Please.
In these upper Paleolithic societies, in which the mother may have been regarded as the sole parent of the family, ancestor worship was apparently the basis of sacred ritual, and accounts of ancestry were probably reckoned only through the matriline. The concept of the creator of all human life may have been formulated by the clan's image of the woman who had been their most ancient, their most primal ancestor, and that image thereby deified and revered as divine ancestress. Merlin Stone, When God Was a Woman.
Right, so the deification of woman just became out of control. She was now a clan totem. She went back thousands of years. See, one thing becomes another thing, right? Something small becomes big. The individual women in the tribe are deified, and the womankind itself, as a primal archetype, even in their consciousness in those days, became magnified. This amazing ability to produce children. And then one of the other techniques that the women used was to say that they'd been impregnated by an ancestor. Now, they had to do this because, you see, some men noticed that the offspring bore a resemblance to them. This was the first clue. The blue eyes or fair hair or the features. They go, he looks like me. So, oops. Bit of forensics is going on here. What do we do now? Well, the crone would just tell the women, don't tell him that it's his child. Tell him it's the ancestor's child, his ancestors. Somebody else from the past who's dead, the dead. So on previous shows you and I have done, we saw this cult of the dead thing coming up, right? Where the goddesses in the back of caves and all the rest of it, of the dead were her children as well. This is how this all came about. Now we have that clinched. So the cult of the dead now became important. Think in Celtic Ireland how big this was. In Mexico, you still have it, the Day of the Dead. It's all coming out of this stuff. Where it's not you and your sperm. It's supernatural. It's otherworldly. I was asleep, and the spirit of the ancient king or the ancient warrior or the great, clan leader from the past or whoever, they can say whoever, came to me in that dream, and I'm with child. Nobody doubted it. Immediately, you were on your knees bowing. Oh my God, the ancestors have visited us. Yeah, I saw him in a dream too, says another woman. Usually the old hag chiming in. Really? Hell? Okay. Wow, he's being reborn. Oh, and by the way, it's even better because when I die in war, should I die in war, or even if I die in any way, fighting an animal, or just normal death, I have the chance to come back through a woman. Immortality comes with this package. Oh, we're good. And the woman just sat back and went, oh my God, we've got them. Oh my fucking God. Oh my fuck. Here, give them some opium. See these kind of guys over there a bit disbelieving? I know. Let's ply them with some shrooms. Let's spike the wine. What the fuck? What the fuck? This is a breeze. We'll feed our children on it. So the male children especially, so that they're already fucking out of it all through their lives. They're in touch with the supernatural, the ancestor world. And then this idea that they have nothing to worry about, just like the Islamic fuckers think that they can go and die in war, and be born with 70 virgins. It's something cut out of the same cloth. I can go like a berserker into war because the women have assured me I'll be born again. When you don't have paternity, that comes much, much later in history, right? But you got all this cultism. She's considered the clan leader, the clan chief. You will incarnate through her. There's just nothing but a cycle of reincarnation and immortality. So you can go die bravely anytime you want. Don't worry about it. Now, the consequences of this are enormous. I hope this is sinking into people. But one of the other things that it happened to do, now, luckily this did change in history, but because it changed, we forget. Throw your mind back, and do you see that when a father is disconnected from his child in the way I've just described, what that does for civilization? But this female intrigue, and a father is not really a lover of his own child, his own son, because he doesn't think he was born from him. It's all the mother's doing. It's all the woman's doing. Have you any idea how this one act has suspended what we call civilization, all caps, for probably thousands and thousands and thousands of years? For as long as this deception lasted, civilization couldn't get on its legs. And women want to turn around and blame men for violence. This is not an act of violence. The suspending of civilization that no book has ever written about, that no scribe ever taught the world. This is not a horror enough? Because later, you see, then scroll forward when you did know about this, and you did know that coitus led to birthing, and the father, his child meant everything to him. His son was of his blood, of his heart. Look at this look at this difference in affiliation, in you transmitting, knowing that it's a blood relation, that you are immortal through your child, and he's going to carry on your ways, and you have to teach him and raise him properly. He's not a flower child, right? He's not, his will is not in circulation around the female will as a chivalric, like the Mordred and the Morgana. No, it's totally different now. And the man is the older man can invest something remarkable for the very first time in his own son or daughter, but mostly son. And so he is riding the war in his father's name now. He's doing everything in terms of his father's name. And that's how our civilizations got created. When that bond finally clicked in, now you got something that would hold together more. And it wasn't as contaminated. But in the days when it wasn't known, and there wasn't this filial connection, it was horrific. And I believe that Sigmund Freud was trying to comment on that when he wrote his famous book, Totem and Taboo. It was his way, imperfect way, of talking about this time when the woman dominated the intelligence and the consciousness of her children, her sons, and they were not connected to the father. He didn't express it the way I'm doing. But when you read his book, after you listen to what I'm saying, and you go and read Taboo, it becomes obvious that the young men of the tribe are they're part of this matrilineal, aspect of consciousness. And they see the father, quote unquote father, as a threat, and they overthrow him. And then they're guilty of it, the way Freud famously wrote about it. But actually, that story is a kind of a nice footnote to what I'm talking about, if you just adjust it a little bit. They're doing what they're doing, not in their own name, but in the name of the mother that they sexually desire. And so I wish that Freud had just had a little bit more clearer vision, but blurry as it was, he's still onto it. He was still onto it in that book. It's actually quite intriguing to read that, as it's another little footnote. Is there another slide?
Yes, we still have a few more here. For thousands of years, these sexual customs had been accepted as natural among the people of the Near and Middle East. They may have permitted and even encouraged matrilineal descent patterns to continue and a female kinship system to survive. Inherent within the very practice of the sexual customs was the lack of concern for the paternity of children, and it is only with a certain knowledge of paternity that a patrilineal system can be maintained. The lack of concern for the paternity of children among the Hebrew people who continued to revere the Queen of Heaven, thus allowing matrilineal descent patterns to continue as a result of the sexual customs, appears to have been the crux of the persecution of the ancient beliefs by the priests of the Hebrew tribes. Merlin Stone.
Yeah. So this is the closest you're going to get. That last slide is the closest she ever going to get in literature that I found where she suggests a crime has been committed and that a kind of act of revenge, might have followed. That's it. That's pretty pathetic. But what it tells you is that they did see the glimmer of what was going on, but they chose to suppress it. So that's feminism in a nutshell. There, it's proven. That last slide proves it. They had more than a glimmer, but instead of being dutiful to humanity, instead of being good scholars, they decided to hide and conceal the facts. Well, it's kind of inevitable, right? Because all women are under the spell of this atavistic throwback of the great power that they once had. And it's a power that was supreme. It's not a power that you can forget about. Or you can consciously forget about it, which is what's happened, but it's there lurking in the background atavistically. And what that means in concrete terms is that they want it back. And so you cannot understand the 19th and 20th centuries and the 21st centuries now without this piece of information. You are like on a desert island of ignorance without this piece. So I don't care what people think. I don't care about their fists in my face and their reactions. I'm not talking a bunch of troglodytes. Without this understanding, you haven't entered into the modern age. These are the intellectual facts. You've got to know where you are. You have to have your GPS. You've got to know where you are, right? Where the sexes are. This is a fight to the death. This is absolute tyranny. The individual, terrible mother with her infant child that she's going to just tear at and crush the identity, all of this has historical antecedents. It's not just a simple matter of some stereotypical domestic nonsense, bad as and evil as that is. You got to back engineer the whole thing. So it's not that man hasn't been violent. It's not that man has not done all the things that the feminists claim that they have, to suppress, right? Look at what the patriarchs did in Judaism. They did do all of these things. They did burn. They did pillage. They did suppress. They did deny women their rights. But wouldn't it be interesting to know the facts of why that was? Truth is truth. It's truth against the world. And the healthy, heroic mind can accept it. But the crawling worm tongue cannot.
I would think
And
without
when
the
you see-
context, I apologize, Michael. I was just going to say, I just feel without the context, if you don't have this past context, then how can we see clearly the present? So it would be very difficult to even know what villains to face or what rites of passage to embark on or what challenges must be faced existentially within ourselves, but even vocationally as a human existing and aging and living in a world. It's hard to even have a compass or an anchor without knowing where we came from. And yet this is the state for so many people.
Yeah. And it's also a terrible crime today to be a woman, to be blaming men for something they didn't do. That's only reactive. When you sign on for it today, you're as guilty as the ones of the past. You've infected your mind with half-truths. You haven't bothered dealing with the actual truth, but this you know. To drag men through the streets, to defame them, when they've literally done everything in your name. Built it all for your comforts. It's atrocious. And the idea is that in the past, you see, the greatest tyranny in the world is being something you haven't earned. And so the woman was deified to the level of goddesshood over this fallacy, over this lie, and therefore enjoyed centuries and centuries of deification and glorification for no reason. For something that no masculine woman would have ever wanted. Don't throw these trophies at my feet until I think I've earned it. That's your Ayn Rand. That's your masculine woman. When I've earned it, then I accept, payment and praise. Not when I haven't. But the history of womankind is to accept all the praise that anyone could ever give. Goddess status, literally goddess status, without ever earning it. In fact, misearning it through a lie, into which there was almost no dissent. They waited till man finally twigged it. And even then fought tooth and nail. And so atavistically, this conflict is registered within the mind of the woman and can be easily triggered by the conspiratorial forces I talked about. It's just steaming there beneath the surface, this idea to attack again. And so when they use these pictures of the modern pop icons, with their talons and their blood and the karate kicking and the Tomb Raider nonsense, women go for it. Or a woman with a bow and arrow, or a sword. As preposterous as that is on one level, the women are into it because they remember the days of this great fight. And they also remember the chagrin, right? The smarting of being torn down from that pedestal. Never in millions of years will that be forgotten. We're only a few thousand years away from that. In millions of years, you couldn't quell it. The rage that's raging within most women and the need, on an atavistic level to get it back. Their shadow work is to face this. They haven't done one iota of it. No woman has. And this is why it's so easy for them to be born into a new society, that breeds the male hatred. And they just accept it, right? And it just immediately works. How can it be inflamed all over the world? How can it contaminate and poison so many people that allegedly are intelligent with high IQs and in good positions, able to work and admire men? How can this poison then be so ubiquitous? It can, because of what we're talking about. Man has nothing in his psyche as violent, as destructive, as aggressive, and as evil as this. Not even close. He's an innocent in comparison to this. But yet his crimes are wheeled out time and time again by the real culprits who've weaponized this and used this, more photogenic violence. I have an article called Phony Feminism. Maybe we can link up to that. Because many other, there's been a domino effect, and many other crimes have come from this original crime. We're just keeping it to the nub of this original crime, which is bad enough. I mean, this is history making. But actually, down through the ages, many other, secondary and tertiary crimes and obscenities have also arisen from this original one. But I'm just trying to keep it narrow so that we can totally get a grip on this for the modern age. These advertisers on Madison Avenue knew all about this. And so when they dress a woman up in fatigues, when they put a weapon in her hand, and a serpent, a python, right? Do you know how many podcasts we could do just on the symbol of the serpent and the woman? And the fact of why the serpent was used, because it has a great deal to do with the psychotropics. The poison of the serpent became the venom was a psychotropic. This thing gets into things that still are largely unknown.
Well, I find that one fascinating. I would love to go back at some point if we could go into the snake venom and the psychotropics and how it was implemented and used, just because I've noticed how ubiquitous it's become in our modern society, so normal for us to medicate children. And, it has to be coming from somewhere, how we can just blindly, for the most part, most people just blindly say, oh, okay, we will put our child on an antipsychotic or like some sort of mind-altering chemical altering substance and not question it. And there's a lot of reasons why that can go into, like, appeal to authority. But I would love to, if that's something that you'd be curious, like interested in doing, that would be very interesting to me. I feel maybe beneficial to listeners.
Okay. And in the meantime, though, people should watch my Female Illuminati program. Again, just sign up for a month and watch that. We've got loads and loads of information on that. This was a cult of Venus, a cult of Dionysus, which perpetrated this for thousands and thousands of years. And also watch this Dead Sea Scrolls deception, series, because at the end of it, we go into the work of John Allegro, who's one of the great authorities on that subject. It's vast as well, and it's coming back. This whole ayahuasca cult thing going on, so when I look at these things, I don't link it to Carlos Castaneda and some of the other nonsense that everyone tries to, I look at it as a footprint of this. Women want supremacy in it. These silly shamans down in Mexico and all, you wouldn't believe what's behind that. How soon it'll be mobilized. It's for no good whatsoever. And it's going to dovetail with all of this, because this is now this history is now the background of new campaigns. So you just don't see it because it's slightly camouflaged. But the women mean business. They want to have exactly the same power that they enjoyed. They never, ever liked being dethroned. And they swore in the deepest parts of their heart, one day we'll have the power back. And so that's what feminism in the first wave feminism was all about. Now we're seeing it, in later phases. So when I have this map, and I've been watching what's been going on since the 80s, when I look at the world, this is what I'm looking for forensically. I'm looking for the footprints, you see. I go, oh no, there's another one that I can see it all. I can see it in all the pop videos. I can see it in all the advertisements. I can see it in the behavior of women individually. And what I'm not seeing is any of the male world having the faintest fucking notion of what's going on. They're always blind. They're always on the receiving end. They're always on their knees. Even the wiser ones like Douglas Murray, some people doing some interesting work. But basically, the programming has been too long in the tooth. It's this blanket feminization, over womankind. The women have it thickly. But men have it too. Men will not listen to any of this. They might listen, but they won't compute. The women cannot compute. They're programmed not to compute it, except very rare souls who have a deep, abiding humanity. They're the masculine souls who put truth and humanity before personal prejudice and bias. But by and large, this blanketing. So then when I come upon this work, I've done it, gradually, so as to not, is to slowly work on these subjects like we've been doing, slowly, so that by the time you get to this kind of subject matter, you've at least tenderized people for some of the stuff on Dragon Mother and the basic psychology. You just can't come at people and dump this. They'll call you a misogynist. That's the only thing they know how to do. It's actually pretty comical, and repulsive, but comical about how little they know about, this knowledge. So anyone coming out with it is immediately demonized. So they got to be made of fucking steel like I am. That's why most men can't do it. They're so fucking ballless. They can't even hear this from somebody else, let alone themselves contemplate it, examine it in their own lives. And what this would mean would be the Jungian shadow work. Observe your projections. Well, in the one area that man is completely weak, like he has no muscle, is in terms of women. He cannot look at his projections on women. And that makes him a victim of women. And, in Jungian terms, it makes him anima possessed. And the whole wide world is now more anima possessed than it's ever been before. The dark side of the anima, right? Because there's also a higher side. And that's embodied by Ayn Rand and Alice Miller and one or two other women that I love, right? Very deeply have learned from them. The Karen Horneys, the Melanie Kleins. They do exist.
I'd like to say, this is, I just want to kind of jump in and mention, if men are this weak to women because of what's been going on for so long and it not actually being brought to light and being addressed in a way that, is hitting at least enough of the population of men that there's a realization happening in we'll say like the collective neural network. If that's the case, women who are listening, this is all the more reason for us to take responsibility for our power. Because if we do hold that much influence over men, then it's our responsibility to do that in a biophilous way, in a non-cannibalistic or vampiric way. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening, especially, people who are listening, men or women, I'm sure you care about the generations to come on some level. And for the women who are listening to that, who really do want to make a change, we do need to do the shadow work. We do need to look into our atavistic memories and the malignant sides of our psyche. I just want to throw that out there. And just a little plug to my video series on the channel too, The Rules of the Game, because it is specifically directed at women to help us understand natural law, but also proper conduct, how to behave conscientiously. So I just want to throw that out there to check that out too. And please continue, Michael.
Please. Yeah. I love that. It's great that you're doing that. And that's what is exactly needed. That's all that's needed. Is like any person who made mistakes needs to confront it, admit it, and work with that archetype so that they're no longer swept up by those who are infested with the criminality. Don't join the club. Separate yourself, differentiate, realize the importance, realize your sovereign duty to humanity comes first. What this would mean, of course, is the absolute ending of all abuse of sexuality and beauty. You've got to turn the tables on what has happened amongst women. Stop blaming men for anything and everything, unless, of course, they are perfidious. But in general, that's got to end. And woman has to stop abusing her own sexuality and her own beauty. These are endowments. That's how much it would take. The education can begin. Go to mydragonmother.org. There's a lifetime of research there just in those free articles. There's 2 books. Start educating yourself, you see, on the true masculine principles. The masculine archetype will help to dissolve this negative anima complex. Because remember, in all of this, what I've said, Although it is a conflict between the genders, woman is the first victim of everything we've talked about. You see? So even if you don't even worry yourself or concern yourself, even from the most narcissistic point of view, the good woman is herself in dire straits because of everything we've talked about. Her life, her future, her children, her civilization is all imperiled by this. Because these are archetypal forces that have swept, you see, womankind up in a whirlwind, in just a horrendous typhoon of evil. And once this really sinks in, then you can break the fascination. I don't want to be part of this. I'm not playing this game anymore. Fall in love with the word no. The details, yeah, can come later. And, you know, the articles I've written, I've dedicated my whole life to this. It was one of the earliest studies. And it took time to mature. You see, the presentation of it. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I waited. You know, before moving into this. With these, to assemble the facts correctly. And it's presented now. There's a book, Dragon Mother, the book, Adultism. But if you just want to start with videos, go to dragonmother.org. As I said, click on extra. There's all the relevant videos are posted, all interviews. Go to Unslaved. Go to Female Illuminati would be the best program to watch for a starter, you know. Then the Auto Rank series on Premium and some of the others. You'll get to every one of the main programs I've done on this exact subject by dragonmother.org. All those links have been methodically put there, you know. They just select those key ones, I don't know, 12, 15, whatever there are, of subject, you know, if this is your subject, if this is what you want to learn more about, this lie of paternity, then I would recommend those. But it branches out from there into other things as well, you know. And then, yeah, as I said, you know, this ended up, you see, this female supremacy then led to almost universal matriarchy in the sense that they had this cultic power. So when they talk about the worldwide matriarchy, I can accept that as long as you're talking about this cultic power. The cult of Venus, as it would have expressed itself in these very important feast days, where there were sacrifices, horrible sacrifices, murder, killing of animals. Oh, that's right. Monstrous Feminine is another series. Monstrous Feminine, Goddesses of Blood, be very high up on the list to watch. Monstrous Feminine, subtitle, Goddesses of Blood. Even start with that, because there's some histories, you see, that haven't been told. Then there's an article on the Female Illuminati website called From Heaven to Earth. That is vital as well. Really is. I'm trying to give the best of the best. That is vital because it takes for granted that the earliest secret society was female. And it talks about then how that became more powerful. It's a very interesting story, slightly separate from what we've talked about, but it shows you some interesting aspects, fascinating aspects. Takes you into the astrology, you know, cosmic events, and shows you how the women gained certain power in another way. We're looking at multiple ways of which this female cultic power, why they became priestesses and oracles, for instance, is one of the most fascinating stories. And that leads in then to the world mythology, where the hero always at some point in his career, you see, is met by a priestess or a witch or a goddess figure, like it is in Celtic mythology, in which she teaches him certain rights, certain powers, you know, awards him with certain powers, or even some sacred weapons, like in the case of Perseus. But in Ireland, we have the story of Ocean, you see, and the beautiful princess in the land of eternal youth, who then gives him a beautiful magical horse, you see, and awards him with immortality. Where's all that coming from? Where did this particular facet come from, that the woman is the keeper of sacred knowledge, sacred wisdom. That's something that hasn't really been correctly addressed as well. So there's a lot of these satellite subjects that come up about, out of what we're talked about. It's not all negative. It's not all negative. But I believe that there can be no sense made of modern times, of the fate of children, of the fate of males, all the things we've talked about, without people seriously, deeply, conscientiously, looking at this subject and getting this as a set of compass points. Where are we? Where are we really? Because there's a conspiracy, all right, but it's not what people think. It's taken on forms. Now, the other stuff is mostly destructive. You see how it works? Like General Wavell said, the right hand doesn't see what the left hand is doing. There's some sort of, puppet show over there to distract you. It's real colorful. It's really animated so that you don't see something that you're not meant to see. And you have to develop certain skills in order to be able to see. Now, we're very, very far from that. We're very, very far from that. People have to really sit down, read the articles on Dragon Mother, read the 2 books, watch the videos assiduously, really spend the time, be patient. And don't trust a single fucking word I've said. There was even an interesting podcast that we did with Caleb Lamont, and it's called Ireland's Satanic Cults. This is yet another little corridor. A podcast, maybe you can even clip parts from it if you watch it. All of these, Monstrous Feminine, if you want to make little clips, perfectly good. Because that's another one. Can you believe this is to talk about what's known as the Fae in Ireland, the Fae. You wouldn't believe where this leads. You really see, it sounds like one thing. It actually leads to lots and lots of other fascinating things that I've been studying for a very, very long time. And then under these videos, when you watch them, there's links. Every single one of them will link you to other relevant, podcasts and videos we've made. Very meticulously, very studiously. These links have been put there deliberately for people to not believe a fucking word I've said and go and research it themselves. Many, many scholarly links have been left, and I know that you do a wonderful job when you put links below as well to the books, to these names that we're talking about. So, like I said, I've had to talk to such turkeys when it comes to this subject. It's really refreshing to be engaged in this way. So big thanks to you, Sarah, for that. Really appreciate it, doing this whole series in such detail.
I will. Thank you. I appreciate the appreciation. And also just want to say, I've, and some people might be able to empathize this with those who are listening. I was raised in such a way where I didn't know any of this stuff until my Saturn return. It took a Saturn return that was a very heavy experience for me to snap out of it. I shudder to think what would have happened if I didn't have that experience. But luckily, I was able to be shocked, almost quite literally, almost onto a path that brought me to this information. So I just want to say there's no shade being cast in this series. It's all about bringing information forward. And I appreciate you so much, Michael, just for taking the time to study this, all of these years to study, but also to share it with us. And I consider it a great privilege to be able to facilitate, this information being put out there. So thank you again, Michael. And I'm really, really looking forward to what comes next.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we bring this episode of The Dark Side of the Female Psyche to a close. There's still more to come in this series, so make sure you're subscribed to Willfully Evolving Woman here on YouTube and turn on your notifications so that you'll know when the next episode is ready. More social media accounts may be added in due time, so if that interests you, bookmark willfullyevolvingwoman.com and be sure to check back periodically. If you would like to follow Michael and learn more from him, you can find his works through the following channels: dragonmother.org, femalepsychology.org, and of course, michaeltsarion.com.
And if you're interested in Michael's premium presentations and the Unslaved podcast, you can find those by becoming a member at unslaved.com or unslaved.substack.com. I'm Sarah DeHaven, and on behalf of Michael and myself, thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.